The timeless message of Psalm 12, a devotional study. Psalm 12 stands as a solemn lament, giving voice to the heartache of King David as he observes the moral decay of his society. Amid this lamentation lies a profound theological reflection on the deceitfulness of man and the unchanging purity of God's promises. It is a cry of despair counterbalanced by divine hope, a timeless reminder for believers in every generation. Through vivid imagery and an unwavering focus on the supremacy of God's truth, Psalm 12 resonates not only as a historical expression of faith, but as a relevant call for devotional introspection. Let us now engage in a detailed and serious exploration, uncovering its eternal truths. The emotional arc of Psalm 12 mirrors the spiritual journey of many believers. It begins in the depths of lament, highlighting the brokenness of a world where truth appears endangered. The cry in its opening verses is heavy with grief, marking an age where lies thrive and godly men fade into obscurity. Yet, the tone shifts with the introduction of God's voice. From despair emerges assurance, as hope is restored in the certainty of divine intervention. The psalm closes with unshakable confidence in God's protective promises. The psalmist's words present stark contrasts that evoke seriousness and awe. The flattering lips and double heart in verse 2 symbolize human hypocrisy in its most destructive form. Against this solemn backdrop, the imagery of divine speech as silver tried in a furnace, purified 7 times in verse 6, is a radiant picture of unstained purity and perfection. These contrasts serve as both a critique of human failings and a celebration of God's unrivaled holiness, reinforcing the devotional introspection this psalm invites. Help, Lord, for the godly man ceaseth, for the faithful fail from among the children of men. They speak vanity everyone with his neighbor, with flattering lips and with a double heart do they speak. The psalm begins with David's urgent plea for divine intervention in an age of pervasive deceit and faithlessness. His lament is one of solitude, reflective of those moments when the faithful seem all but vanished, a grim portrayal of a broken society. The mournful cry for help is universal to anyone searching for righteousness amidst spiritual decline. The Lord shall cut off all flattering lips, and the tongue that speaketh proud things, who have said, with our tongue will we prevail, our lips are our own, who is Lord over us? For the oppression of the poor, for the sighing of the needy, now will I arise, saith the Lord. I will set him in safety from him that puffeth at him. In these verses, the psalm shifts from a human perspective to God's declaration. Within the psalmist's lament, God responds with a fierce assertion of justice. His response is deeply comforting. The oppressed and humble are not abandoned, but are heard by the Almighty. The Lord's imagery as a divine warrior ready to arise brims with power and hope. For religious devotees, these verses are a reminder that oppression, however pervasive, does not escape the notice of God. The words of the Lord are pure words, as silver tried in a furnace of earth, purified 7 times. This verse stands as a profound declaration of what sets God apart. His words are untainted, reliable, and utterly holy. The imagery of silver refined to perfect purity underscores the unparalleled trustworthiness of God's promises. In a world where human speech is mired in duplicity and vanity, the distinction of divine speech becomes an anchor for the faithful. Thou shalt keep them, O Lord, thou shalt preserve them from this generation forever. The wicked walk on every side when the vilest men are exalted. The psalm concludes with an eternal assurance. God's protection is steadfast for those who remain faithful. While wickedness may appear unchecked and the power of vile men seems to thrive, the promise of divine preservation remains unbroken. This duality, the thriving of the wicked and God's sovereign protection, offers comfort amidst the chaos of life. Psalm 12 is more than a historical lament or a theological insight. It is a personal challenge to every believer. First, it calls us to reflect on our own speech and integrity. The psalmist decries deceit, pride, and hypocrisy. This should prompt us to ask, are our words aligned with God's truth, or do they reflect the duplicity of a broken world? Second, it invites us to trust fully in the purity of God's promises. The refinement of God's words, as silver purified 7 times, reminds us that His promises are unblemished, worthy of both our faith and our obedience. The refinement of God's words, as silver purified 7 times reminds us that his promises are unblemished, worthy of both our faith and our obedience. Third, it compels us to action. Let us advocate for truth, justice, and godly integrity in our communities. Even when deceit and arrogance surround us, we are called to be steadfast beacons of God's justice and mercy. Finally, this psalm is a summons to prayer. When David saw corruption flourishing, his immediate response was to cry out to God. Let us likewise bring our concerns for truth, justice, and personal sanctification before the throne of grace, trusting that the Lord will arise in his time. Psalm 12 is a solemn and timeless declaration of the human struggle against deceit and wickedness, balanced by unwavering hope in God's justice and purity. It vividly portrays both the distress caused by a decaying moral landscape and the reassurance offered by God's promises. This psalm calls us into a deeper dependence on the purity of God's word and challenges us to embrace integrity in all aspects of our lives. As modern-day believers, we are reminded that God hears the cries of the oppressed and promises to preserve the faithful for all generations. Let Psalm 12 serve as both a comfort and a call to action, a sacred invitation to trust in God's steadfastness and stand firm in our convictions amidst a world in turmoil. May this reflection inspire your devotion as you draw nearer to the word of a God whose promises are eternal and whose justice will one day reign in full.